So it's really great to see some familiar faces. Just again, want to thank you all being here on such short notice. My name's Kim O'Mara. I'm the acting director of development at Search for Common Ground. I really know how full everyone's days are. So just really thank you for being here. And
No,
I know we'll also be sharing this recording with many of you who wanted to join us today. So if you're watching this later,
it's
thank you as well.
from Search
If
for
I back and
Common
ask that
Ground
maybe everyone
Development.
mute themselves in this moment, that would be great. I'm pleased to welcome today Shamil Idriss, CEO of Search for Common Ground, and Maya Savir, our Israel Country Director. And I'll just set the stage quickly just to share that we all feel this is a complex moment, but it also feels like a turning point. And that's the reason we enter this conversation today. And for me personally, this week, I felt that I took a deep breath and I immediately felt myself holding that same breath again. And I keep going back to just a month ago when I was so fortunate to have time in person with Maya in New York last month. And what really struck me was how she and her colleagues have never stopped planting these seeds of connection. They've been laying the groundwork for peace, even in the hardest circumstances. And if this feels like some light is beginning to break through, I know that I'm eager to hear in this moment about the hope that comes next. So, with that, we just wanted to provide a space today that's really meant to be informal. This is a dialogue, not a briefing. We'll hear from Maya about what's happening on the ground and Shamil about what this moment really asks of peace building and peace builders everywhere. So, with that, I say please feel free to jump in with questions. Please feel free to use the Zoom feature to raise your hand if you'd like to ask them live or to drop them in the chat. And again, thank you so much for being here. So, I will jump in just with a question to Maya, and then Shamil can take it over with a few of his own. So, Maya, again, thanks for being here today. I can imagine the places you've been and the spaces you've experienced this week. So let's start there. What's it feel like to be on the ground in Israel right now?
Um, Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Hopeful, cautiously hopeful, but hopeful. It seems like there's more oxygen in the air. The live hostages are home, and for a few days, we've been seeing visuals of mothers and fathers reuniting with their sons, with children reuniting with their fathers, with siblings, with lovers, seeing each other again. And it was really hard to breathe with this going on. And on the other side, I just spoke with a friend in Gaza who said to me, her voice sort of cracked. She said, "It's the first time it's quiet. We haven't heard quiet for 2 years." So there's this sense of, okay, we can breathe a little bit. And also for me, I think I want to be very cautious about it because I think this ceasefire was long overdue, and I'm so grateful that we arrived at this point, but it's only a first step. And if we, I think it's very natural after such a catastrophe when it stops to say, okay, now we can rest for a bit, but we can't rest. We immediately have to continue working because if we allow ourselves this rest, we will go back to where we were on October 6, 2023, which is not dealing with the conflict. And there is a conflict, and there are two peoples here, and we have to deal with it so that we are not again thrown into this horrendous violence. So I think that's where I am.
Maya, thanks for being with us. And for everybody who's joined us, especially those of you who have a history with Search for Common Ground. And there are two people here who really have a history with Search for Common Ground. John Marks, our founder, and Susan Collin Marks, who really built the organization together with John. I just have to call them out. I didn't know they were going to come. It's such an honor to have them. These are mentors and heroes of peace building. So for those of you who know us, you know that everywhere we have these multi-partial coalitions, teams that are drawn from across dividing lines. And so going forward, we will have more opportunities for supporters like you to engage with both our Palestine and Israel directors. We're in between Palestine directors right now, so we're hearing just from Maya. But I just wanted to front that, just so people are aware, very aware of that for us. Maya, I would love to ask you. So, you and I, the last time I was in Israel and the West Bank, I think I relayed to you that I think it was with Tzipi Livni, the former foreign minister who I was meeting, but she articulated something that I heard from many Israelis, um, where she said, and this was after the war had started, but this was some time ago now. I think it was 18 months ago. But she said, look, you have to understand that this issue, this conflict, has not been a topic in the last 5 national elections going back 20 years. Uh, and then she leaned in and she said, let me clarify. I'm not saying that the candidates who raised it lost. I'm saying it was not a subject. It was on the back burner. And so for it to literally explode in people's consciousness in Israel in the most traumatic way possible on October 7th, 2023, everyone here is very much on their back foot and there's a trauma response, anyway. And I guess I want to pick up on that. What are you looking for? And it's probably premature to ask this, but maybe even in my most hopeful moments, what are you seeing that might indicate that we're not going to go back to well, this is handled now, as long as there's physical security within Israel from the West Bank and Gaza, it's sort of settled, or what are you looking for to indicate that maybe, you said this is a first step. What are you looking for to see whether that there will be actually a second step and maybe thousands after that?
I think that's really the best question now. We are not out of the woods, so to speak, on both counts. First of all, the ceasefire is very fragile, and there are too many forces who would prefer that it not stick. And we are also not out of the woods in the sense that you're asking about not returning to a space where it's so easy to suppress, to pretend that there's no conflict, like everything is okay. I do think that things have changed. I do think that the majority of Israeli Jews do acknowledge now that there is a conflict. And although some are entertaining really unrealistic and also immoral thoughts about solutions, they are nonetheless acknowledging that there is a conflict. And to me, as a peace builder, this is something I can work with. There's a handle there, because before October 7th, many people just said, okay, so there's something, but it's not urgent, right? We can control it. And that's gone. And it's almost impossible to talk to someone about what lies beyond their blind spot. And so that blind spot is either gone or it's much smaller. So there is something to work with. And the second part is that I'm really hopeful that the international community here will be helpful. I hope, the coalition we saw that was able to bring about the ceasefire is quite remarkable. We had a US administration that really decided that it's time. I wish it were sooner, but there you go. It came now. There are the Europeans that were on board and supported, although some of them had their own initiatives, really beautiful initiatives, but still, when there was something tangible, they came, they gave their blessing and came about. And also a very interesting coalition of all of the Arab countries. That's very, very important. And it really brought the forces together and created a momentum. Now, this momentum is very important. First of all, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the word peace is on the table again. It has not been on the table for so long. And for the past week, this is all that we've heard. So that's really, really important. What I would like to sort of shed light on is the link, which may be a missing link, but it doesn't mean that we can't create it, is between the ceasefire, what we're seeing as the Trump 20 points, to the day after. This is what we need to focus on. And there are day after plans, and there are partners on the ground. And this is what we need to make sure, that there is a transition between the two parts.
Given that, thank you, Maya, for that. I mean, what are your and our team's sort of biggest priority, given what you just said, that desire to draw a link between the 20-point plan, fairly high level, but still substantive, and a day after, or a legitimate process. What are the biggest priorities for you all right now?
Maybe my answer will have maybe two parts to it. The first is really to focus on needs. There are really needs on the ground that need to be addressed. And maybe I'll get into it a little bit later, but we are working with partners in Gaza. The need is tremendous. Our responsibility is endless. And we want to respond to this, first of all, because it's the right thing to do. And also, I really think that the work we are doing is creating the basis for future peace building between Israel and Gaza, and Israel and the West Bank. And hopefully the West Bank and Gaza will be, united under a single Palestinian entity. So maybe we'll get to that in a moment, but that's the first part. The second is to take the work that we have been doing, and we do have a basis, in Palestine and in Israel. We are very well positioned within the peace camp and within civil society, and to start introducing this work into the various dynamics that are going on. For instance, nobody really knows what the dynamic will be and what kind of framework we will see. For instance, for the day after in Gaza. But we do have connections in Israel, we do have connections in Palestine, and also in Gaza, and also regionally, and want to suggest our expertise, our know-how, and the people that we work with to be able to really help make this transition from a ceasefire to humanitarian aid and development work, and to peace building. So this would be our focus.
And can you share a little bit about, you mentioned just earlier being in touch with a friend in Gaza. I was just, as we were having this conversation, I didn't even think about this, and I happened to look to the right, and you and I, when you visited, I was so frustrated that I happened to be traveling, and so you and I didn't get to see each other. But you did leave this behind for me, and maybe you can tell the story of this. I look at this every day. Talk a little bit about just maintaining those links, specifically with Gaza.
Sure.
What opportunities you are seeing to do that first step that you were talking about, of sort of helping to meet the needs. And I think, and I'm sorry to bundle three questions together, but I think overlaying all of this, the level of, the level of trauma is, I don't, uh, it's almost unimaginable, right? When you start thinking about it. And I think one of the things I noticed in Israel when I visited, was just how ubiquitous the photos and the stories and the names of the hostages were everywhere. From the moment I set foot off the plane to literally everywhere that I went, you could not look at a public space or whatever without seeing the Bring Them Home campaign and the demonstrations in the square, et cetera, et cetera. And uh, and so you have a level of trauma among Israelis, and certainly now among Palestinians, that is so profound that even just attending to that trauma itself seems like a really critical component of this. So anyway, I've just bundled a bunch of kind of incoherent questions for you together, but talk a little bit about how you maintain those links, what the openings, if
Sure.
any, are to doing that work in Gaza, and this overarching question of dealing with the trauma.
Okay, let's start with the connections. So the people I know for years in Gaza are peace builders. By the way, very frustrated that the majority of the world, I mean, usually in the world, nobody sees peace builders in Gaza. They're just lumped together. It's, in a way, it's similar to what peace builders in Israel have been feeling for the past 2 years, especially. So the connections are daily. This has been going on for years. For years, every time Hamas fired missiles on Israel or Iran, I would get messages from my friends in Gaza. I hope you're okay. And the opposite, I would always, I know where these friends are, and I would check on them. I have a friend in Gaza who just last week, when the ceasefire was announced, said to me, I can't wait to see your hostages being hugged by their families. So this is on a very, very personal, humanistic level. And I also want to acknowledge that the people that I am in contact in Gaza are also very brave. I mean, they're living under a regime that does not support this kind of connection. And maybe moving on to the picture you just showed, because it also is based on personal connections. So there's an Israeli artist. His name is Ze'ev Engermaya. He's an artist and an activist. He was very, very active for many years. And then after October 7th, he began to draw these very bleak images. Yes, his style is a little bit naive and very colorful, and he began to draw just in black and white, very, very bleak pictures. And then he decided a few weeks into the war that he would draw hope. And he drew, for instance, hostages as, they were still in Gaza, but he drew them how he imagines them to be when they would be released. And he's been doing that for quite a while, and he has a lot of traction on social media. So he has a lot of legitimacy. And in May, just this May, a few months ago, leading up to a peace conference, a peace summit that we held together with our partners in Jerusalem, I contacted him. I didn't know him. And I said to him, I have a dream. This is how, sort of like, I'll just add, people write to him about their dreams and he draws them. So for instance, parents wrote to him, I have a dream that my son will come back from Gaza, and he drew this. So I wrote to him, I also have a dream. And my dream is that you will do for peace what you do for the hostages. And he was like, what? What do you mean? And I said to him, people can no longer imagine what peace will look like, and we need help. And he really hooked onto that. And the picture, what Shamil showed, is a map of Israel and Palestine with it. Maybe you can show that again. And the different places in Israel and Palestine, all as he envisions peace. And he did this for the summit. And then he said to me, listen, what I want to do next is draw personal stories of people in Gaza. And Shamil, this goes back to your question, because I can't stress this enough. People respond not to numbers, not to models, they respond to personal stories. So one of the initiatives that we want to begin is an initiative in where we would bring through our partners, and maybe I'll say something about our partners in a moment, through our partners, personal stories from people in Gaza, specifically children. I like ice cream. I miss my mom. I miss my home. I want to go back to school. Really personalized stories of specific people in Gaza that we would bring through our partners on the ground. And Ze'ev, the artist, would draw them. And we would have 20 or 30 of these stories. We'd have an exhibition that we would be able to move around with, and also a catalog. Again, portraying personal stories. And I think this is what we are most missing, humanizing experiences of the other. So that's just one example. On the ground, besides my personal connections, we have partnered with a very interesting initiative that is called the Gaza Children's Village. It was initiated by a partner, a very interesting man, Palestinian American. He's a doctor. He spent 2 stretches during the war operating in Gaza. And then he decided to do something that is more on a grand scale, not more meaningful, but certainly different. So on the ground, there are already 2 academies that are for orphans in Gaza. The initial idea was actually to establish an orphanage, but it turns out that these kids have extended families with whom they live, but they do need a structure, and they need food, and they need medical support. So these academies, there are 2 already. One is in Deir el-Balach, the other is in Khan Yunis. The first has room for 600 orphans, the second for 1,500. They come every morning, they have schooling, their curriculum is pro-peace. This is something that is very important. They learn about different religions. They learn about Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. They learn math and English and science and literature and art. They receive 2 meals. That's huge in Gaza. This has been going on for the past 2 months already. So even during the height of the war, and sometimes there's enough food. This is also quite extraordinary for them to take home to their extended families at the end of the day. And there is a medical staff on the premise to give the kids whatever they need. All the staff is all women. Also very important. We know that in any conflict, women and children are those who are most vulnerable. And maybe to add something else to this, which I find remarkable, there are many Israelis contributing and working together on this initiative. I've been in contact in this initiative from the beginning, and 100% of the Israelis I contacted for help, it took them no time to come on board. Some with their professional expertise, for instance, engineers who went online with our partners on the ground in Gaza, consulting on how to create these compounds in a way that it wouldn't be too hot for the kids, because it was August, too hot. Others, supported with money. And we're not talking about big donors. We're talking about people who gave whatever they could. Some managed to bring donations of dignity packs for the girls who are at an age where they need support. Otherwise, they can't go to school while they're menstruating. So I think it's quite remarkable. And in 2 weeks from now, we are bringing together a search with the help of the Dutch ambassador, a gathering for civil society leaders in Israel to come to meet David Hassan, who initiated this, to see how we can further support. And back to what you asked, Shamil, this goes to the needs on the ground, and also to peace building, because this is how we're going to create these connections.
I know I really want to open it up. I know there are a lot of people here with their own experience, and I'm sure questions. And I just want to ask one other thing. You referenced the peace camp in Israel, and I remember you sharing the information about the rally and not just the rally, the conference that came together, and one of the things that at Search we've always sort of prided ourselves on in a way is figuring out a way to, to build the foundations for sustainable peace from across constituencies that oftentimes would include people who probably wouldn't define themselves as part of a peace camp, right? Like in all these different contexts, like by having, um, uh, and so this question really is informed by two things. One is, you know, um, what openings, if any, are you seeing? To some extent, maybe you just started with it by giving an example of this gathering and the civil society people who are coming together. But what are you seeing on the ground in terms of Israelis dealing with their own trauma, first of all, and then also being willing to participate in something, especially if it has peace camp written on it? For years, what we heard is that the peace camp is irrelevant and dead. And I wouldn't say that myself. That's what you would hear when you would talk to pretty much anybody. So how do you think about this issue of helping Israelis of all backgrounds to process what they've been through and ideally come out the other side as a constituency um, for a truly dignified future for everybody, Israelis and Palestinians alike? And how much momentum and opening are you seeing for that in Israeli society today?
I'll start with the peace camp, which has truly transformed during this war, in the sense that it always existed, but in the last two decades, under this current Israeli regime, it became apologetic and fearful, and wasn't vocal about peace, sort of settling for a lesser conflict management or just agreement, not even saying the word peace. And that has changed during the war. Also, the different organizations, 65 organizations actually, have come together in one coalition. This is drama because it never happened before. Peace organizations have always been able to argue about everything, really, and now have been able to come together to agree on the basics. So all of these organizations, us included, are continuing to do their own specific peace building work, and I'll get to us in a minute, but are cooperating on the larger picture, which we've been able to do large events, including this peace summit in Jerusalem. 10,000 people actually bought tickets and came to listen to us talk about peace. That's a lot during war. And just last week, actually on Thursday, the morning that the ceasefire was announced, we went to Ramallah, to the Muqata, and met with the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, who invited us. So actually, we planned this a few weeks back with the surge of recognition of Palestine all over from various countries. We decided that we want to engage in a more complex and nuanced conversation in which recognizing Palestine is not against Israel. And through our connections, we sort of invited ourselves to meet the Palestinian president, who is a very warm individual. And, everything he said is what every Israeli would want to hear. And it's, media is maybe another conversation we need to engage in, but media is not helpful because his words are not reaching, the larger crowds. And we were there, and and we discussed exactly this. We welcome the ceasefire. It's high time, but we cannot stop with the ceasefire. We have to deal with the issues on the table. So, that's regarding the peace camp, and maybe now the peace camp and also us. So the peace camp is not new, but it has to change. It has to open up its doors. And, if we remain, in this conversation, only peace activists, the traditional actors in Tel Aviv and Ramallah, we are not going to get anywhere. And this is sort of, I think, our unique, we're not the only ones doing this, but there are not enough actors doing this. I really, really believe that we need to open the doors and invite non-traditional actors to the conversation on the future, not only because it is strategically wise to do so. I think it's also morally the right thing to do. And I think that people who are not included in the conversation on their own future are not going to be supportive, and they're actually right to not be supportive because they feel that they're overlooked. So this is, I think we can see this in our work on the ground already, and we would really like to expand this work and deepen it. But in our work with women's leadership, which, you know, is a personal favorite of mine, because it brings together so much of our values. First of all, you know, we all know that when women are involved in peace discussions, then the agreements are more likely to be sustained. And also, you know, specifically in Israel and in Palestine, civil society is filled with remarkable women, also in leadership positions. But then when you get to the room where things happen, there are no women. And we really want to change this. So, you know, we have a track to process in Palestine and in Israel with remarkable women, all very accomplished women, either formally in their work or in leadership position within their communities. And now what I really want to stress is that there are quite a few track 2 initiatives going on at the moment, very interesting, and I'm part of many of them. But ours is unique in that it is diverse. And this, you know, goes to Shamil, what you asked. We have women who are lefties, traditional peace activists, but we have people who are center leaning in their politics, and even right wing. We have secular, we have traditional, we have religious, national religious, we have Orthodox religious. We have representatives of Russian-speaking Jews, of Mizrahi Jews, of people who are from the peripheral areas who are usually really not included in any discussion on peace. And not only are we engaging in this discussion, these women are also designing initiatives to take back to their communities so that they will be able to invite their communities to the discussion, to really take part of shaping the future. So on that, one more thing I want to say on the maturity. Shamil, you asked more or less on the maturity of the Israeli public regarding peace. So I think it's a little bit too soon to say. I think there is a huge relief that this war is over. I mean, all public opinion surveys have shown that for 13 consecutive months, between 70 to 80% of Israelis have been very adamantly calling to end the war. So, you know, this is long overdue. There is a willingness to move on to a diplomatic process, even if it's not called peace at the moment. It can be called peace, it can be called agreement, it can be called separation. These are all variations on the same subject, which are to find a solution. So this is cause for optimism. And a last point that I want to stress is the energy of civil society, which in Israel is diverse and very, very strong. Maybe I'll just add, after October 7th, essentially, nothing was functioning here. The government was not functioning. And what sort of kept everything together is civil society. I'm talking everything. Food for internally displaced people, and even civil society that organized established organizations to start putting together lists of who was killed and who was kidnapped. And then moving on, carrying the torch of really demanding the war to end. In numbers, the protests demanding to end the war, we're talking about protests all through the war, even during missile attacks. We're talking about 5% of the total population of Israel. That is a lot of people. The American equivalent would be 17 million people in the streets calling to end the war. That's a lot. And now the question is, where is this energy going to be redirected? Right? Because the war is over. The hostages, the live hostages are home. And now the question is, what are we going to do with all this energy? And this is where we come in as peace builders, in really making the case that, okay, we stopped the war. Our hostages are back, and now we have to, we need to make sure that we are not falling into the same comfort zone of ignoring the conflict and really saying again and again, October 7th is what happens when there is no peace. And the only way to prevent another October 7th is to make peace. And to answer to, the majority of Israelis and the majority of Palestinians who are sure that there's no one on the other side. And this is again where we come in our unique position as a cross-border organization, in echoing voices of Israelis who want peace among Palestinians and vice versa. Peace-seeking Palestinian voices among Israelis.
Maya, thank you. I have so many other questions, but I've overdone my. I think we want to open it up for other people. I do want to say, because I was going to share this before we close, but the conversation will likely take us up to the last moment. There is a very long time supporter of this organization. I'm not sure if I'm authorized to share the name or not, but somebody who's on this call, who, as one of the ways after actually your visit to the States very recently, Maya, came forward and said that in addition to the gift that he's already making to the organization this year, the contribution he already made, that he wants to give an additional $10,000 if we can raise $40,000 for our work in Israel and Palestine. So that offer was just raised to my attention over the last 2 weeks after your visit here, that I missed, and I wanted to share that with folks just before we go to the Q&A and discussion that will probably take us to the closing. So just recognize that if you or anyone you know might want to help us trigger that additional 10,000 by contributing, that would be a lovely way to support the work that Maya and our team are doing on the ground. Let's open it up. If there are any questions, you can put questions in the chat. You can raise your hand. And Kim, if you're seeing any questions that I'm missing, please just step in. And if I don't see any, I will just continue. So unless you want to be hearing more from me, I will say I'm moved, Maya, and I appreciate the diversity of approaches from that track two work, which was also, I think, the context within which I met former Foreign Minister Livni, was in the networking out of that group, and the meeting with the president, all the way to cartoonists and the provision of dignity kits, like the whole range of, frankly, sort of top down and bottom up peace building activism and support. If we don't see anything else, I will ask you a question, and then if something pops up, just make it a very short answer so we can address the interests of people in the group. What, beyond contributing, I think one of the things that I find very difficult sitting in the United States is that the discourse on this conflict, from where I sit, and maybe I sit in a unique place, I don't know, but from where I sit, 95% of it is deeply unhelpful. Regardless of where, it's just, the minimizing of the pain of one community, the complete ignoring of it, or oh, there are hands up. Let me stop talking. If you get a chance at some point to address the ways in which those outside, particularly Americans, can be helpful beyond giving a check, and we welcome the checks, I'd love you to do that. But let's go first to Hillary. And then we have one other person who I can't see. It just says Zoom user. So I'm going to ask you each to just introduce yourself and your connection to Search if you have one, and then please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Maya. I'm Hillary. I'm on the board of Search. And I just want to thank you so much for who you are and how you are and all the work And my question has to do with, I guess, in some ways, what's happening inside Palestine, Gaza right now, and how to differentiate Hamas from the citizens. Just as similarly, I think Israel faces a similar challenge, how to differentiate Israeli citizens, Israeli Jews from its government. And I'm curious, do you feel that there is within the Palestinian community a robust set of thinkers and actors who are ready to move forward, even if it means standing against some of what is happening with Hamas? Because I think you can see already in the American news cycle how challenging covering Gaza now suddenly becomes when we're able to see a more complex picture. So I'm curious what you see and what you think about that, and reciprocally for Israel.
And Maya, why don't we take the other question or comment so you can just address both of them? Please go ahead.
Kathy Eldon here. Actually, I was going to ask exactly the question that you has stated, Shamil, because as somebody, many of us have networks, and we'd love to know how to share this information in a relevant and meaningful way. So I really was just the same person, but yeah, you got in there first. So I just wanted to reinforce it.
So I'll try to answer all questions together. There are partners, Hillary, and on the ground, but it's very, very difficult. The distinction is not that hard. What is hard, what is challenging, is to create the spaces in which they feel safe to talk. In Israel, it's not easy to be a peace builder because you are labeled either as naive or a traitor. And the government has been buckling up, and the police has become very, very difficult. And the second part of this maybe goes to what our friends in the States can do. But, first of all, to acknowledge this is not easy. It is still much easier than to be a peace activist in Palestine for various reasons. In the West Bank, it's not easy because there's a lot of pressure and also a natural sentiment to resist connections with Israelis. And it's very, very hard. Just to give you an example, in June, actually, it was right at the beginning of the war with Iran, a group of, I think it was 200 leaders from the peace camp in Israel and in Palestine were invited to meet with President Macron of France. And at the last moment, many of the Palestinian friends were pressured into not participating. By the way, the majority of them did not cancel. But still, it's not easy. In Gaza, the situation is much harder, and it may be a little bit premature to say what things are going to look like. But let's just say that Hamas's cruelty is not only directed towards Israelis. I have two friends who spent 7 months in prison before the war, in Hamas prison, for being in contact with Israelis. So, we need to be very, very mindful. And whenever, for instance, when I'm in contact with friends in Gaza, I let them initiate. Unless it's just how are you, just making sure you're okay, I let them initiate. What we need to do in order for everybody to be able to express their peace wishes is to create spaces in which they feel safe. Now, we know how to do this in Israel, and we know how to do this in Palestine, and we want to continue doing this. And in order to create spaces where Israelis and Palestinians from the West Bank, and hopefully soon also from Gaza, can meet, we can only do this abroad now. It's quite ridiculous. There is theoretically a space in Area C where we can meet in Beit Jala, where Israelis can go to and Palestinians could go to, but this is more in theory than in practice, especially if we want to talk on, a large scale. For Palestinians, the West Bank has become unbearable. The IDF has placed so many checkpoints that, for instance, for a person coming from the north, from Jenin, to get to Beit Jala is a maybe. Maybe they can get there, maybe not. Maybe it'll take a few days, maybe not. Maybe they'll be stopped. So it's not really practical to plan meetings. And for Israelis, also just, 3 or 4 months ago, I had a meeting with a Palestinian partner and with the Dutch ambassador to Palestine. And I was stopped at the checkpoint. The Israeli soldier told me I can't pass. He wouldn't give a reason. He just said that if I don't turn my car and go back, he will arrest me. So there are people who are very adamant. There are creative minds and courageous peace builders in Palestine and in Israel. What we need to focus on is creating the spaces for them. And the distinction, they will make the distinction. I don't think we can do it because there are all of these undertones, and sometimes it's easier to talk and sometimes it's not so easy to talk, but they exist. Just to give you an example, just before the peace summit in May in Jerusalem that I mentioned earlier, I was contacted through a Palestinian friend of mine, a colleague of mine, by a doctor in Gaza, single mother, by the way, who had heard that the Israeli peace camp was getting together in a summit. And she said, I want to reach out. I want them to know that we are not Hamas supporters, that we want peace. And so we had this conversation, what to do. And the end result was that she had her daughter film her a 4-minute video in which she spoke to Israelis saying, I'm reaching out. We want peace. We want a normal life. I think the second question, can you remind me what the second question was? Sorry.
The 2 questions were about what I think you've addressed what
Yes,
Americans can do or not do. Right.
Yeah, sorry, I just needed a reminder. So I think this also is also connected to what Hillary asked. The conversation about the conflict has become so flat and binary and unnuanced that I think it doesn't even consist a conversation. It's just people throwing mantras at one another, slogans at one another. It's not really a conversation. And people are expected, I think maybe they also feel an internal impulse to do so, but they are certainly expected from the outside to choose to be either pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. And this is very unhelpful. And I will say to you what I say whenever I meet people, in Europe or in the States. To support Israel blindly is not helpful. First of all, for the very practical reason that the Israeli government is acting against the will of the majority of Israelis, and this is supported by all research, and it actually doesn't even have to do with left or right. So essentially, to support Israel without any criticism is to support the government and not the people. And to supporters of Palestine, again, to say from the river to the sea is not helpful, right? It's also unrealistic. If you want to support Palestine, if you want to support Israel, what you need to do is support the peace community in Israel and in Palestine. These are the people who are going to bring about the change. And adding a little bit more to this, I think we need to create spaces also in the States where people can engage in this complex conversation. And I think Search can be a convener of such spaces. As you mentioned, I just came back from the States, and in New York and also in Boston, sometimes alone and sometimes with a Palestinian partner, we were able to create such spaces where all the tough questions can be asked, and where we actually said you do not need to choose between us. We are on the same side. We are on the side of peace, Israelis and Palestinians. So let's change the conversation from a binary pro-Israel or pro-Palestine to a pro-peace versus we have no solution, but we do, and we can present this.
So there's one more hand up, and then there are two hands. So I'll ask those two people very quickly, ask your questions, and then Maya, I want to respect people's time. So as soon as you are done answering those as succinctly as you can, Kim, I'll just let you close out. Let me just thank everybody again in advance. Elizabeth, please.
Hi. So I have two quick questions. One is based on what you were describing I was always envisioning that it was complicated dynamic for you to kind of work with your counterparts within Gaza, but are you anticipating in this new environment that you're going to feel additional pressure from, pressure/threats from the current administration to try to inhibit your work as you work towards peace solutions? And then somewhat related follow-up on that, you talk about how to engage non-traditional actors in this process. I'd be curious to hear who those non-traditional actors might be, right? Like who, either groups or even individuals, thinking in that if you're engaging certain actors, I'm sure it could potentially alleviate some pressure that the administration might put on you because they're politically, powerful in a way that it would undermine that energy. But also beyond the whole political dynamic, just, like non-traditional actors, I'm just curious to see who in your mind would be optimal in that environment.
Great. And Jim, last question or comment?
First, I want to say hi, Amaya. Also, John and Susan, it's great to see you on the screen. Quick question. Well, I want this to be a quick answer, but it probably, and that is, do you have a simple way of capturing how search is different in Israel from other peace groups or, people-to-people groups, of which there are quite a few? So for us who are trying to promote search, that quick statement of what makes search unique there.
Maybe I'll start with that because you asked for a quick answer. I think the fact that we are an international peace-building organization, which brings a wealth of perspectives and experience. Just to give you an example, I mentioned the Track 2 and how we want to enable these women to be in the room. Well, Search has done this in other places, in other contexts. So we have this wisdom that we can tap into. And so I think this enriches it. And also it goes to our ability to say, we know what we're talking about. We have this experience and we have these people who have been doing this for a while. I'll try to very, very briefly answer the three questions regarding the complicated dynamic and whether this administration is going to try to stop us. The answer is they are going to try. And the second part of the answer is that they're not going to succeed. First of all, because we're not going to give up. We know what the right thing to do is, and we're going to continue to do it. And also because we are flexible and we have many connections. So, if during the height of the war, we were able, it was really, really hard, but we were able to work with partners on the ground in Gaza, then we will be able to continue doing it as we move forward. It means that sometimes we don't succeed. Just to give you an example, bringing into Gaza baby formula, it took us 4 tries. And this is after we had all the authorization we needed. But we continued again and again. When I say me, I mean it like it's a broad coalition. It's not me personally. Regarding the non-traditional actors, just to give you an example, I just met today with the political team at the American Embassy because they're very close to the current Israeli administration. And, if we can get their backing and if we can get their cooperation, then that would open doors for us and also create a legitimacy among communities that are right-wing and religious in Israel. So it's just an example, and I'll stop here because I see we have 1 more minute and I want Kim to close.
And I promised I would be quiet, but I have to tell this quick story because it answers both Elizabeth's and Jim's questions in a way that brings to life what you just said. If you recall, Amaya, one of your former colleagues who had to leave the organization, not because she wanted to or we wanted to, but we literally ran out of money for that project, Dahlia Goodhart, who I traveled with, Orthodox Jew living within 20 minutes of Gaza, her house shaking from the bombing. When she was asked at CAA, the talent agency in LA, by somebody after we gave a presentation, why did you choose to work for Search for Common Ground, instead of all the other peacebuilding organizations? I didn't even know this answer until she said it. She said, to be honest with you, when they made Aliyah from Australia to Israel, I wanted to look for a place that would help assure that my children could live a safe future. And Search was the only peacebuilding organization that I thought would take somebody like me. And so they asked, what are you talking about? And she said, well, I think for others, maybe I'm too Zionist. And now again, unpacking all of that, the point is that when we talk about the peace camp and you talk about the breadth of coalitions, whether you're talking about religious, politically conservative, religiously observant, from the armed forces, whatever, that's really the breadth of kind of who we seek to be everywhere. And it's great to have people like you, Maya, on the ground who are very, very skilled at building those kinds of teams. Anyway, I'll shut up. Thank you, everybody. Kim.
Yeah, just thank you both, Shamil, Maya, and all of you really for being here and part of this. Really, I took another collective deep breath, just seeing you all here and show up and really reaffirms these are the conversations that people want to be engaging in right now. So I just want to put a point on the fact that, you've heard today, this work doesn't end in Israel and Palestine, and we are really thinking about how to bring these stories of hope and connection into our own communities, especially at a time when divisiveness still feels so close to home. So with that, I really invite you to continue to connect with us. We would love your ideas and partnership as we build that out, whether it's creating spaces for dialogue in Jewish communal settings, engaging artists like Shosh Engelmeyer, who Maya spoke about, to express peace through creativity or art, or simply helping us imagine how these conversations can take root here in the US. So we're planning for Maya and other peace builders to visit next year, and we'd love for you to be part of helping shape those gatherings and think through what would be most meaningful. In the interim, please do connect with us. We'll make sure we follow up with everybody on this call. We'd love to answer any additional questions. I would love to engage personally with all of you in these conversations. And I want to make sure that you all know about another virtual event happening November 13th, which will be Shamil in dialogue with our colleague Neelan Parker, who oversees our US-based work, and they'll share more about how our teams are addressing rising rates of polarization and political violence in the US. So I think it's a really natural tie-in. The registration is going to be in the chat, and we'll make sure that everyone also receives it in the follow-up. So thank you again for joining us, and wish you all a wonderful day. Take care.